welcome to the third and final video for week 2. What you see here is a problem from your book. This is on, it starts on page 118. I wanted to go through this problem because this problem has some interesting features to it that I wanted to talk about, and then it's also got some interesting dynamics happening in our sensitivity analysis. Okay, so what's going on here? So first, let me just reset everything. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay. So what's happening here is you've got this firm that sells these radios, and this is the profit. So they sell them to the marine, what do they call it? Marine equipment distributors, business equipment distributors, national chain of retail stores, and then direct mail. And so this is the profit per radio when they distribute it through the marine, the business, the retail stores, and the direct marketing. Here's their advertising budget. They've got $5,000 to spend, and if they want to advertise with the marine distributors, that's $10 per unit, blah, blah, blah. Here is, what was that? Oh, this is the sales effort, right? It takes 2 hours to sell a radio to the marine guys, 3 hours for the business, 3 hours for the retail, and they've only got 118 hours of salespeople available, right? 0 hours for the direct mail. Now, this is an interesting constraint. It's a valid constraint, and this is one you're not going to see a lot, right? But I did want to talk about it. What we're saying here, and if you read through this problem, management is saying we're only going to produce 600 radios. Now, you don't see this a lot, but it can happen. You could think of this as a capacity constraint, right? In other words, their factory, they can only produce 600 radios at a time, right? So between the marine, the business, the retail, and the direct mail, we only have 600 radios that we can sell, okay? And then this one is interesting. I did want to point this one out. This is a valid constraint. It's a little bit different. We've changed the non-negativity constraint, right? You know, on the first video of week 2, we've talked about changing the reduced cost. Tells us, you know, if we change the non-negativity constraint by 1 unit, what would happen to our production values or our choice variables, right? Well, you can set some of your choice variables to other than greater than or equal to 0, and that's what we're doing here. So if you read through the problem, what management is saying is they want to sell at least 150 radios through their retail distribution network. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but that's what this is saying, right? So in a sense, I can actually get rid of the R here, right? Because I've made the R now, its non-negativity constraint is actually R has to be greater than or equal to 50. I'm sorry, 150, okay? Now that's valid. Sometimes you want to do that. Okay, so let's run this. So I've got, you know, I've transferred this problem into something that Excel can deal with. So let's solve this guy. All right, so I want to maximize that by changing all of these. And again, this is nice too, because you can see here I've got more than just 2 choice variables, right? I've got 4 products. Okay, now I'm going to deal with my constraints. Well, the first 2 I can put in at the same time because they're less than or equal to's, right? So I'll do those, add. And then of course these others I have to do by themselves, right? 4 is equal to that number, add. And then this has to be greater than or equal to this, and there we go. Right, I'm still going to click this box. It's okay, because I've essentially overridden that constraint when I put it in here. But I still want to click this box because I still want M, B, and D to be greater than or equal to 0. All right, so then I'm going to hit Solve, highlight my reports, and then I'm going to hit OK. All right, so my answer report. Okay, again, I'm not going to bore you with this. Same thing, right? Final value of my objective function. So I'm going to make $48,450 in profit. Final value of my choice variables. Now, this is where I was getting at. This is one of the reasons I wanted to show you this. Notice that in this program, we are not going to produce any for our direct mail chain or our direct mail distribution. And I wanted you guys to see that that's okay. Remember, the non-negativity constraint on M, B, and D were greater than or equal to 0. So in this case, we have found a situation in which we are not going to sell any radios via the direct mail distribution system. That's fine, all right? Sometimes you will get this, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to show you this problem, right? Okay, and then here, same thing with all this. We've gone through all this. Constraint 2 is not binding, but the other 3 are, and you can see that here. 5,000 equals 5,000, 600 equals 600, blah, blah, blah. Notice here that I've got, I used up 1,775 hours of the sales time, whereas I could have used up to 1,800. Okay, we got that. Limits report, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I think you guys get it. Here, what's interesting, I did want to show you this, is the lower limit and the upper limit are the same. And this can happen a lot, right? Particularly with some of these more complex problems is, like you can't change anything, right? So what this is telling us is that if we change something, based on our current constraints, right, this is all she wrote, right? Choice variable M has to be 25. Choice variable B has to be 425, so on and so forth, right? So I do want to note that this can happen where the upper and the lower limit are equal to each other. Okay, so here's the big one, the sensitivity analysis. And this is really what I wanted to show you guys. I've got a couple of negatives here, and I wanted to talk about this. Negatives are okay for a reduced cost or a shadow price. So what is this telling us in this particular case? Well, remember, the reduced cost says, look, if I increase the non-negativity constraint for M, nothing is going to happen, right? My profit is not going to change, okay? If I reduce the non-negativity constraint for B, nothing will happen to my profit. Now, notice here, the reduced cost is the same. So remember, R, the restriction on R was that it had to be greater than or equal to 150. Well, what this is saying is that if I increase R by 1 unit, nothing is going to happen to my profit. Okay, I'm going to get to that in a minute. It actually something will, but here, nothing. What this is actually telling me is that, see, since I'm not going to sell any of my radios through my direct mail chain, what this is saying is that if we made a restriction that you had to sell at least 1 unit through the direct mail chain, that your profit would go down by $45. And so I want to show that to you. So to do that, I could go into Solver and I could create another constraint. And so this constraint would be thus, right? This is the quantity for D, right? And I could say, look, make that greater than or equal to 1. So in other words, I have to sell at least 1 radio through my direct mail chain or whatever it is. All right, so I'm going to hit OK. And what I want to see is this is going to fall by $45. So this is going to be $48,405. Solve. Voila! $48,405. So indeed, if I place a restriction now on my D variable, then my profit will fall. And that is what this reduced cost is telling you, right? And again, I want to point this out because for some of these larger problems, and larger I mean problems that have more choice variables or more constraint, you may run across situations where even though you're maximizing profit, you don't produce, like in this case, you don't sell anything through the direct marketing channel, okay? And that's absolutely fine. So don't worry about that. Okay, and then I wanted to get to this. What is this constraint telling me? I got a negative $17 here. Yikes. Well, what this is telling me, actually, it kind of goes against this, and I don't know why Excel gets these a little bit different, or goofed up, I guess. But what this is actually telling me, the shadow price here says that if I increase constraint 4, or my R variable, if I increase that by 1 unit, then my profit will actually fall $17, despite the fact that this is a 0, right? In the way I view this reduced cost should be a negative 17. I'm not sure why it's not, right? We'd have to talk to our good friend Bill Gates. But I want to show that to you. So I want to go back here, and I want to make this 151, okay? And then I want to go to my solver, and I want to get rid of this, right? No, it's right here, H3. I want to delete this one, because that was a constraint that I put on for D. I got to get rid of that, right? Because I have to hold, when you think about these shadow prices, reduced cost, right, it's holding everything else constant. So you can only make one change at a time. So now if I hit solve, there it is, right? My profit fell, I can look at this, yeah, 14,450. Now it's, what am I talking about? 48,450. I don't know where I came up. Oh my gosh, it's getting late. It was originally 48,450, and of course now it's dropped to 48,430. There is my $17 decline. All right, and that's exactly what this shadow price was telling me. So I do want to point that out. The idea here is in those other two videos, right, all the reduced costs were positive, all the shadow prices were positive. Well, they don't have to be, right? And it's okay. Do not freak out if you see some negatives in the reduced cost or negatives in the shadow prices, right? You can get, again, with these more complex problems, you may get some negative numbers, and that's absolutely fine, all right? Okay, so with all that said, everything else is the same, right? So holding everything constant, I can increase my constraint. I can increase the value of constraint 1 by 850 units, or decrease it by 50 units, and this shadow price of 3 will still apply. Right now, here for constraint 3, I can only increase it by 3.5 units, decrease it by 85, and my shadow price of 60 is still going to apply. And again, I remind you, oftentimes we think of shadow prices as kind of being the maximum that you'd be willing to pay for those constraints. And I do mean that. I mean, see, the idea is if, like with constraint 3, if you can buy an extra unit of constraint 3 for anything less than $60, right, then your profit is going to go up, all right? And that's what this is getting at. And of course, again, you can have negative shadow prices. All right, well, that's it for week 3. I think I've kind of covered everything that you can see in some of these sensitivity reports. In the homework for chapter 3, you'll be solving more of these problems, but now looking at the answer report, the sensitivity report, and perhaps the limits report. And just to reiterate, the sensitivity report is by far the most important one. This is where all the really good information is. All right? So that is it for this video. I guess that's it. I will see you later.